watching Morning at NTV.
All right, a very good morning. Many thanks for keeping it with us. For those that went with us into the break, welcome on board. If you are just joining us, the Kickstarter discussion is at hand. Strengthening Uganda-South Sudan relations is the topic. We have with us an eminent guest, but before I introduce him, let me just give you a preamble to the discussion. There are multiple and long-standing ties between Uganda and South Sudan. The current civil war in the world's newest country has impacted politics and the economy in both Uganda and South Sudan, as well as relations between Juba and Kampala for the positive. There are issues that have to be dealt with in the world of business. For now, what we know is that exports from Uganda to South Sudan have increased at an annual rate of 46%. That is from $17.3 million in 2012 to a staggering 357 in 2020. What's more, any insecurity or disturbances in either country affects another slightly, and the people within the positions of power are always engaged in discussions and agreeing on ways to ensure things don't go bad and that economic and socio-political transformation stays the agenda of the day. I can now introduce my guest, His Excellency Simon Juat Deng, the Ambassador of South Sudan to Uganda. A very welcome to the program, Your Excellency.
Thank you for the opportunity, Genji, and thank you to the viewers.
Yes.
NTV management.
Good.
You gave a very wonderful introductory background, but at the outset, I just wanted to clarify a few things.
Perfect.
South Sudan became independent in 2011, and NTV media houses in Uganda went to witness it. And before that, we were part of the Sudan. But it looks like most of our brothers in the East Africa region haven't still moved on. They still call us Sudanese, but we are not Sudanese, we are South Sudanese. Also, before the independence, the southern part of the Republic of Sudan, which is now South Sudan, we used to be called Southern Sudanese. But Southern Sudanese now apply to people in the Republic of Sudan. And South Sudanese people, you call them South Sudanese. So if our brothers and sisters in East Africa community, I just want to say we are South Sudanese, not Southern Sudanese. Because South Sudan is an independent entity, is a republic of its own,
That is right.
and Sudan is a republic of its own. And therefore, the current situation, the conflict going on now, is in the Republic of Sudan, not South Sudan, just for that matter. Coming back to the key points you've mentioned, really very true. South Sudan and Uganda have very strong cultural, economic, and political ties. If you see from the West Nile, northern Uganda to the eastern, these are the same cultural groups as in South Sudan. So you would find we have the Kakwas in Uganda across the border in South Sudan. You have the Madis here, the Madis in South Sudan. Acholis. You have the Ateker family, like the Karamojong, the Dodos. We have the Toposa on the other side. So that's what really makes our relationship very strong. And going back to pre-independence time, where our communities supported each other. So we want to build on those cultural and economic ties that we are working with now with the government of Uganda.
Okay, thank you very much for what is no doubt a very timely clarification on the status of peoples and of course how the naming ought to be understood. I was aware, but many of our people were, I'm sure, are now emboldened by that clarification. Allow me just ask you a very political question. South Sudan has been a flashpoint over the last 40 years, and on Tuesday, South Sudan celebrated 40 years of the SPLM movement, an outfit, I must say, though I don't not sound derogatory, but it has been part of the South Sudan establishment, and it actually identifies itself as the political and administrative arm, more or less, so to speak.
Yes.
But there are, of course, other players. Just bring us up to speed with the evolution of South Sudan and the role of the SPLA, SPLM.
Yes. Thank you once more, and for the viewers, SPLA was founded 40 years ago, actually 40 years and one day, like it was 40 years yesterday.
Yeah.
There were, and the genesis of that comes back to what here you will talk. There was a politics of identity rather than the politics of ideology, where the Sudanese people were divided along their identity, and others were left in the periphery. So the most of the present-day Republic of South Sudan were marginalized in various aspects, in education, in the economy, in the political life, and therefore people became disgruntled. So they would never saw themselves as the part of the Sudanese state. So for those reasons, actually the war started way back 1 year before the independence of Sudan in 1956. So in 1955 we had a Nyanya 1 movement, and
what movement is that?
It's called Anyanya 1.
Anyanya 1.
Anyanya 1 is a Madi word for poison. So, so maybe if they are Madi
I've encountered the word Anyanya in
Yes.
my readings of history.
Yes,
And of course.
So it started with the Nyanya 1. The war went on from 1955 to 72. A peace agreement was signed, and there was a period of 11 years where there was stability. In 1983, that peace agreement was abrogated by former President Jafar Numeri, and that's when the SPLA, the youth, in various aspects, decided to take up arms to demand for freedom. So that's when our current president, His Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit, the late Dr. John, went to the bush and founded the SPLA, SPLM. So it was not a long, it wasn't an easy march to freedom. There were a lot of sacrifices. About 2.5 million people died. And we never had any infrastructure. For example, the tarmac road in South Sudan when we signed the peace agreement in 2005 was only 25 kilometers. 25 kilometers. That's in the area of 6,400 kilometers. So you would find, but now we have more than 1,000 kilometers. We are moving gradually, but at least since we took our own destiny, we are able to make some developmental projects so that our people also catch up as in the region. So yes, the SPLM anniversary was yesterday, and we're thankful to the people in the region, especially the Ugandan people, the citizens, government, because Uganda provided sanctuary to our people since 1960s up to now. So we are ever thankful to the people of Uganda and the government.
Okay. We shall return, or rather get to the refugees question and the relationships between Ugandans and the people of South Sudan a little bit later. Let me just keep it to current interventions to point the progress of socio-economic transformation towards where South Sudan wants to be. Coming into the East African community dispensation has been one of the aspects that the country has pushed. On the economic front, what are you offering the rest of East Africa in terms of business interests and, for example, markets? Of course, we do have an idea that most of our goods are exported to South Sudan, but what is the comparative advantage that South Sudan has in relation to the region?
Yes, South Sudan, basically, I would say, is a food basket not only for the East Africa region, but for the whole of the continent of Africa. The reason being we have about 68% of arable land, and currently, according to the statistic, we are only utilizing 4%. So we call upon the investors in the East Africa region, in the wider international community, to come. We are an agricultural country, especially in Uganda. I'm seeing you people have started doing value addition. So you bring your agribusiness industries so that you add value to all those endless types of crops and both animal and crop husbandry. For example, in the western equatorial region, that's Yambio, is an area that is blessed with the fruits and vegetables, but there is no one single fruit making company, like there is no cannery. So to me, it's a more agribusiness, value addition, industrialization, and also that industrialization, we are working now to have a very stable source of electricity to be able to open up opportunities. So, and from the statistic I have, we have close to 1 million Ugandans that are doing business,
that are already doing
business all over South Sudan. You go into Juba now, there is a market called Konyo Konyo, Gumbo. Is run by Ugandan basically, so you wouldn't think you are in South Sudan when you go there. Back to you.
Away from the natural workings of the private sector, where traders are able to export goods across and also be able to import if they are Ugandans and export if they are South Sudanese, what is the blueprint like at policy level? For example, investment and driving the nature of capital investments that you want for Ugandans to be able to invest in South Sudan?
We have very good tax regimes, and there are several incentives that we give to investors, whether small or big, especially in areas related to food items, agricultural material, and construction material. There is a very tax-friendly regime for the investors that allows them to establish and also repatriate their capital when they want to do so. So you make your profit and you have to repatriate it when you decide to do so. The trading is going well, but however, I just want to register one thing. In 2018, we signed the revitalized peace agreement, where previous all armed opposition are now in the government, but one group decided to pull out for no justifiable reasons at all. And they are the ones causing attacks on our common border, especially on the main trading route between Juba, Nimole. So these are the people we call on the Ugandan community, the people on the border. In the border is South Sudan, our law enforcement agencies, to really to sniff these people out, because they are not good for the business in Uganda, not good for business in South Sudan, and for the region. And these are the people attacking the commercial cars, killing innocent civilians, and crossing our trade routes.
All right, I'm glad you mentioned the issue of attacks on Ugandan traders and the general insecurity within that part of South Sudan that continues to hinder the conduct of business. Whether it is the work of a force or a group of wayward gun-wielding militants is something that should be addressed, especially promptly, by the government in South Sudan. Given the multiplicity of militias that could be operating within, what is the military posture right now that the SPLA or M has to ensure that is put, or rather controlled, effectively once and for all?
First of all, There are no multiple militias operating anymore in South Sudan. All the previous armed actors are integrated into the South Sudan Defense Forces, but only this one group, and they call themselves National Salvation Front, led by a former General Thomas Cirillo, who refused to join the peace process, and they are the one responsible for the attacks. Recently, there were people even crossing into Uganda, caused some issues, they ran back, just to tarnish the image of South Sudan as a country, and also to create fear. So our military intelligence forces are doing what they can do, but this calls for a close cooperation between our two sisterly countries to be able to sniff these people out, because as I said, they are crisscrossing the border.
I'm sure the people watching there include traders who are still concerned about aspects of compensation of losses made, especially during the height of the civil war and when the attacks were rampant. At policy level, what is the engagement like right now? Has that issue been resolved?
Yes, it is good that you brought it up. I was talking to somebody, it's mainly within the Kampala City Traders Association, who was spearheading this. That thing is being handled at the government-to-government level, and I'm sure that information is filtering down through the government of Uganda to the Traders Association and to the wider population. So that thing is being handled, and really shouldn't be, as I said, we have better tax policies in place and regulation. So I think it shouldn't be discouraging other potential investors. And if these people want to have a further discussion, we are available to take up through that grid channel where we were dealing with the government of the Republic of Uganda.
All right, like I promised earlier at the start of this discussion, let's now delve into the issue of refugees, the crossing over of South Sudanese into Uganda. There's also the crossing into South Sudan of Ugandans.
Yes.
So as two countries, the policy framework that allows for harmony and resource allocation to ensure that that very integral aspect of our regional politics and dimension is taken care of. Are you part and parcel of the existing good framework as far as handling of refugees in Uganda is concerned? There are very many who have crossed into Uganda and live within settlements that have now effectively become South Sudanese settlements in northern Uganda. What is the resource allocation package that Juba has to help Uganda deal with the challenges of the refugees?
Yes, thanks for that question. You know, South Sudan is an active member of the United Nations, Africa Union, the member of East Africa Community. So we are channeling our efforts through the multilateral system to be able to support these people, not only as South Sudanese within the camps, but other refugees as well. And as you correctly said, always we talk of the number of South Sudanese refugees in Uganda, but also the statistic we have, the number of other nationalities, mainly Ugandans, who are settled in South Sudan, either working as professionals with the United Nations, other international organizations, doing their privately run businesses. Many, the number is over 1 million from what I was given by our Bureau of Statistics. So the issue of the refugees, the conditions are much better back home now. The conflict is no more, and our Refugee Commission is working with the agencies to see if these people can be encouraged to come back home and contribute towards the development there.
Okay. Just the other day, sector players from across the region and Africa indeed gathered at the Kampala Serena Hotel just above us for the 10th East African Petroleum Exploration Conference, and South Sudan is an oil producer. Uganda is seeking to make inroads given the investments that have been rolled out, including Jacob. I do not know whether at that level who is benchmarking who. Could you just take us through South Sudan's oil management framework and what could be readily available in terms of benchmarking, and whether within that oil and gas sector, whoever is watching there and would love to be an investor can quickly come on board?
Yes, that's a very good one. I actually attended that meeting. South Sudan is now over 10 years. Okay, together, since we went to Sudan, we're almost 20 years experience in the oil and gas sector. So I'm sure Uganda can benchmark. They will come and learn on what we've done well and where you need to also to improve. So currently, our pipeline runs north to Sudan, to the Red Sea. So there are investment opportunities for any other investor sitting out there to come. We are opening some refineries. So it's a project we are working on. Wow. We're looking for alternative ways also to diversify our sources of getting the oil out. That's in terms of pipeline. So again, the opportunities are endless basically. So, and it's open, it's a competitive process, but I'm sure people in the East Africa region have an advantage because it's the same context. So the cost of doing business will be lower for a Ugandan, for example, than somebody from Eastern Europe or other parts of the world.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's transition from oil and look at strategic security within the region. South Sudan, being a country that has dealt with a civil war over the last 40 years, of course, stands at the forefront of conflict resolution. The region continues to suffer a lot of conflict. DR Congo is one. We now see the not little, that's an understatement, a conflict between cattle rustlers, Turkana, Karamajong, and Toposa in South Sudan. I'm sure there are interventions at community level, at local government and regional levels, given the fact that South Sudan has regional governments. What is the strategic blueprint that East African leaders ought to adopt in order to solve what is no doubt a recurrent and long-standing security question?
You know, the East Africa, we are now working towards that political federation, the monetary union and the custom union. One of the things that our leaders are doing with respect to the stability is the interventions in the hotspots. For example, you know now there is the East Africa Force in Eastern DRC, which Uganda is a contributing member. South Sudan contributed as well, as a matter of stabilizing that country, not only for political reason, but it's also a big market, a country of over 100 million people. So that's one way to do that, and you can also see now when the issue in Sudan, the war broke out, there was an IGAD meeting. IGAD, that's mostly countries in the East Africa region, except I think Burundi, who sat, and President Salva Kiir was nominated to lead a team to talk to the warring parties in the Sudan, supported by President William Ruto and President Abdullah of Djibouti. So that mechanism is there to ensure where there is a problem, we come in as a community and settle it. Coming to the issue of cattle rustling, it's a big issue. Even in Uganda, I was in one of the districts the other day, and I was told there was also raiding between one district to other parts. So it's a complex matter that made it not only a political decision, but we also need to study it. We need the academics to do some proper research so that we see what are the triggers and how do we stop it. So it needs a comprehensive approach which we are seeking.
Okay. All right, Ambassador, I would like to ask you to give us your last words because we have less than 120 broadcasting seconds.
Look, this again is to give my thanks and appreciation to the people of Uganda, to the government of Uganda for that cordial political, cultural and economic relations with South Sudan. And as the South Sudan ambassador to Uganda, I will do my efforts to redouble those efforts. Like currently we are sitting at almost $400 million trading or more, and I want by the end of my term we will oversee over 500 billion dollars, so that a lot of trading happens between us.
Is there extension of terms for ambassadors?
No, we work on a cycle. You come, your term finishes, you go. It's only in very exceptional circumstances.
Okay. Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of South Sudan to Uganda, His Excellency Simon George Deng, many thanks for the perspectives and of course making time for Morning at NTV.